Good afternoon, Minal Gajab. I have done my smudge, and I just want to say Minal Gajab. Good afternoon, everyone. And Nin Minal Gijagon Kwe and Dishnakas, Wapshashi and Dodem, Nin Mama Makwan Dodem, Flying Post Treaty 9 in Dunjaba, which is over by Timmins. Nijomade, Ojibwe Anishinaabe Kwandao. It's really good to be here. I live in Kitchener here, and like Stan said, I'm director of the Center for Indigeauga. Indigeauga means learning about Indigenous knowledge in an Indigenous way, and in our Anishinaabe Mowin, it would be Anishinaabe Kenakandasawin, which is like learning about an Anishinaabe way of being in using Anishinaabe teachings. And so I want to say miigwech for the invitation here. I'm going to share with you this afternoon on how we search using our Indigenous ways towards rebuilding knowledge. And this is something that I'm passionate about, and this is something that I happen to stumble upon, I guess. Like many of us, we didn't think that we were going to become that we didn't think we were going to be doing what we're doing. I mean, for me, I didn't know that I would be going to university. I didn't know that I would be doing a PhD. I didn't know that my PhD would turn into a book. And like Stan said, I just published the second edition of Kandasawin, and it's this orange. This is what it looks like, and I'm really proud of this work. It's taken a long time. This is a lot of years of work in there, of like looking at how do we come to know as Anishinaabe people, as Indigenous people, how do we build knowledge? How do we, through those journeys, restore our Anishinaabe way of knowing, our Anishinaabe way of being, and our Anishinaabe way of doing and practicing. And so I'm going to, I believe I can just start sharing. I'm going to share this presentation I've prepared. And I just need to get at the slideshow here so I can share that with you. And I want to just acknowledge that a lot of the land influences and informs how I work. Growing up in a little place, Cranberry Lake, it's up 50 miles north of Parry Sound, 50 miles north of Sudbury. Some people that might know the area, it's just before Henvey Inlet First Nation. We used to call Henvey Pickerel, and I've always lived there. My dad, this is my family. My dad's in the background, my mom, my daughter, and my grandchildren, and that's my grandparents, Elizabeth and Shannon Cryer. And we're from Flying Post First Nation, which is, like I said, up by Timmins. And my dad worked for the CNR railway track, and my mom spent a large part of her young life, 10 years of her life, at the Chapleau Indian Residential School in Chapleau. And that residential school experience had a pretty severe impact on our whole family. And I also have experience of knowing my Kokomish and my Shomish, and who lived in a little log cabin in the bush without hydro, without gas, without a vehicle, without a phone. And my Shomish was a hunter, a fisher, and a trapper, and my Kokomish was a hunter, a fisher, and a trapper. And they lived in a little log cabin, and so I have in my memory experiences of being rooted on the land and growing up in this little place called Cranberry Lake, which is, nobody really knows where it is except that it's off the railway tracks. And then going and visiting my grandparents in the bush And when I started a journey of searching for how searching for how we come to know. This started when I was doing my PhD, and I always had a bit of a resistance and a bit of a refusal to privileging Euro-Western dominant knowledges because of the people here, because of my Kokomish and my Shomish, because through them I was exposed to an Anishinaabe traditional way of life. We ate moose meat, we ate partridge, we ate fish, we ate deer meat, we ate smelts, and we ate we had our own gardens. My parents were avid gardeners, so we grew and ate our own potatoes, tomatoes, carrots, onions, and my mother taught me how to search the land for life. So my mother, since I can remember, would take us out in the forest, and there we would harvest leeks and fiddleheads. We would pick wild strawberries. We would search for blueberries, black currants, gooseberries. We were always harvesting from the land, and that happened pretty much from all year round, because different depending on the time of year is where you can harvest particular medicines or foods or animals. And so I'm so grateful for how I was raised and how the land fed us. And so I'm situating, how we search using our Indigenous ways in those roots, those deep roots that I carry through my Kokomish and my Shomish, through my mother. And despite the residential school resocializing my mother, and despite the residential school dismembering us from our community and from our land, despite the colonial violence that we experienced, somehow my spirit continued to reach for life. Somehow my spirit and my desire to know, how do we come to know as an Anishinaabe person, to center my Anishinaabe Kanakandasawin in how I went on to do my doctoral studies. Somehow, my spirit was always reaching those questions. It was like the little tapping, tap, tap, tapping. And I believe it was the spirit of my grandparents that always guided me. And that caused me to search for ways in which we come to know. And because, in that, we all need cultural mirrors. And what I mean by that is we need to see reflections of ourselves in the literature, in the world around us. We need to see positive, healthy images of who we are. And for the most part, in this colonial society, that's been absent, that's been erased. And what's happened with a lot of us is that, colonial, the colonial dominance of Euro-Western values and have generated a trauma of fear, insecurity, uncertainty, where we haven't been exposed to, role models. Today, I feel like, people say that I'm a role model because of the work that I've done and the way I live my life, and I have a search in me. I'm always searching for the truth. I'm always searching for ways that we restore, what it was my grandparents wanted us to know. And because I have those visual memories of watching and witnessing this beautiful way of life that my grandparents had, it was hard. Make no mistake, living in the bush is hard. It's lots of work. Yet it was so beautiful. The knowledge that they had. I wanted to know who else was out there. When I started my PhD in 2002, I started looking for, how do we come to know? Research is a way of how do we come to know? That's what research is about. It's a search for knowledge. It's an inquiry. It's a curiosity. It's a wanting to wonder and wanting to wander and go on a journey of learning. And I had that in me. I've always had that in me. And so I went on this search looking for Indigenous ways of coming to know. And so my whole doctoral work that I was doing 20 years ago, I can't believe it's been 20 years since I started my PhD. Where has time gone, eh, Mona? Geez, it's crazy when you think about how much time passes. Like listening to the trajectories and the journeys we've all been on is really remarkable, and how we're always reaching for this good life, this minobamatsu, and how we're reaching to restore what colonial violence has tried to annihilate and exterminate and erase. So I searched, and I've always been searching. And so in the search, I was wanting to create something that was meaningful. And so this is an art piece I did for a friend of mine. And I just want to say that this took me months to do. It didn't just happen. It happened with a blank canvas, and it happened through a process. And I brought this forward in this presentation because when we arrive at something like with the Indigenous Diabetes Health Circle, where you're at today, and the work that people are doing, that didn't just happen. Sometimes we get to where we are today, forgetting that there's been a whole journey that's happened over years to creating, to generating, to finding meaningful ways to represent our experiences, to respond to our needs, to create, to build, to restore. And I like this piece because when I started painting this piece, it really happened in layers and layers and layers. And I just think that it really shows how when we come together that we can have so much potential and so much possibility to build and to create and to restore knowledges and community that are more relevant, that are more meaningful and more purposeful to us as Indigenous people. So when I started my PhD, for example, I was searching for who else is out there. I was searching for Indigenous ways of coming to know. And it was like going into the forest. Anybody out there? Hello? Because, there was this erasure of Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous peoples narrating and telling our stories in our own way, in our own voice, that was rooted and grounded in our truth. And so when I searched, I went to the earth and I traveled and I met people and I met Indigenous searchers all across the country. And I searched for people who were doing, re-hyphen searching. And I use a hyphen because the hyphen to me represents a number of things when I say re-hyphen search. The hyphen is a pause. And research is one word, has no pause. So I wanted to rewrite that and reword that, what we as Indigenous people are doing. We're not just doing research using Euro-Western dominant theories and methodologies, because that hasn't helped us. That's served to diminish us and to erase our knowledge and to put us in a place of certainly not being producers of our own knowledge. It's put us in a place of inferiority. And so when I searched, I went and talked to Indigenous knowledge seekers across the land and asked them how do they bring their Indigenous worldviews into how they come to know, which is what re-hyphen searching is. So the re is like to do something again. The hyphen is a pause, and we're searching and we're pausing and we're trying to figure out how do we do this in a way that aligns with our Indigenous experiences, that aligns with what it is we're trying to restore, what it is we're trying to build, that reflects our reality, that reflects our truth. And so on this search, I dreamt, and it was a little petal flower. I went and gathered from Indigenous people. I read Indigenous people's literature and their their journals and their articles, and I talked to some amazing Indigenous knowledge carriers across the country. And some of them are you have in here as some of your keynotes. I see Cynthia was a keynote earlier, and I want to acknowledge and lift up all the Indigenous knowledge carriers and the elders here that have laid the foundation for us, that have left good footprints. And so I followed those tiny little trails. I followed them. I made pathways where there were none. And because I grew up in the bush, I'm not afraid to bushwhack and to go to places that others haven't gone to. And in that, I found a petal flower, and it was a little petal flower that said, "Pick me, use me." And what I'm going to share with you is an overview of holistically what is an indigenous way of coming to know that is holistic, and what do we bring to that search, whether you're in an organization, whether you're in a community, whether you're wanting to do some kind of an assessment or an evaluation, or whatever you're searching for, whatever it is that you're wondering about, whatever it is that you're curious about, that you can do that, you can engage in that search using a holistic framework. And this petal flower in my dream, it came to me and represented that holistic flower. So just as an overview, the roots represent our worldviews. The center flower represents each of you that is central to the search, who you are, where you come from, and what gifts do you have. I'm going to talk about that. The leaves represent the journey. The stem represents what gives you backbone, who supports you. The petals represent your diversity, and all the different ways that Indigenous people across the land are engaging in knowledge production. And then I'm going to talk about the environment in which we're searching in. And so I'll begin first with the roots. And in Indigenous ways of coming to know and knowledge building, your roots are really what is foundational to generating any kind of project, search project or search process. And through the roots, that's where you acknowledge and talk about, what is your worldview? What paradigm? I mean, the worldview is like what the paradigms are and the principles. What kind of values and principles will guide you? What kind of you could say ethics will anchor how you search to know. And some people talk about like the ethic of Sama, the ethic of tobacco. There's so many teachings in tobacco that tobacco as an offering is an ethic of respect. It's an ethic of reciprocity. It's an ethic of relational accountability, which means I will do my best to honor the spirit of the knowledge that you're sharing with me. These are principles, and there are many other kinds of principles and values that can anchor and be the foundation for a way of coming to know. It's important to identify what those are and what is the worldview that is going to be foundational to how a search is going to happen. And from the center, that's kind of small. I'll go to this one. From the center of the petal flower is the searcher. It's you. It's me. It's everybody that is setting off to go on a search. And in that, there's this thing that I call location. Locating yourself. As Indigenous people, we always locate, like, who am I, my nation, my Anishinaabe name, my clan. That's my creation family. I locate myself in terms of many, like where I grew up, the land that raised me up. I locate myself in terms of who I am. And in doing that, I'm talking also about who I'm not. So location is something that is where you begin to talk about who you are and who you're not. And, earlier in the address, Mona did that beautifully when Mona located herself and who you are, what knowledge you carry, what experiences, what your gifts are matter in how you generate knowledge and how you build knowledge bundles. So, for example, I have the privilege of working with a lot of Indigenous searchers in the country, and I have the privilege of reading their work and offering them feedback. And I get to see examples that are emerging these days, and I see Indigenous searchers bringing their gifts into their search. So, for example, if you love beading, or you love making moccasins, or you like sewing, or you like being out on the land and canoeing or photography or whatever, you would bring your gifts forward and generate a methodology, a process of gathering that aligns with who you are, that aligns with what you're comfortable with, what you already know. You would build on your existing strengths. This is different than Euro-Western ways of coming to know that say that you have to be objective and neutral and free of bias, which all that stuff is false, by the way. There's no such thing as neutrality. There never was. There's been no such thing as neutral research that's been done on and about Indigenous people ever. That research has been done to support and justify racism and colonial violence against our people. It has by no means been neutral. And so when there has been all this research that's been done on and about Indigenous people that has generated, inaccuracies and misrepresentations and misinformation, it's been all done with a particular agenda in mind. Now, the reverse, take that and turn it around and reframe it. We in Indigenous ways of coming to know say actually the opposite. To locate yourself, to acknowledge your gifts, to bring yourself forward is ethical. Even when we go on a search and we search from our relatives. So I've brought some family members into some search projects I've been involved in because they carry important stories that I'm working on restoring. And it's not unbiased. It's not biased for me to bring them into my research. In fact, it causes me to be more ethical. It causes me to be more conscious. And in fact, I agonize over the meaning that I make from those searches because I have so much love and respect for my family and my community that I really put a lot of work and effort into making sure that I treat the spirit of the knowledge that they've shared with me with the utmost respect. And so in that way, location is actually ethical, where you put yourself forward and you identify and own who you are, and then in that way, who you are not. So and the arrows in here speak to how your worldview informs who you are. So there's going to be a strong relationship between a worldview and the principles that guide you, that are your inner moral compass or your inner code of life, or where you receive your instructions on how to live a good life. And we have our creation stories that guide us and help us, and our clan systems and our teachings help guide us. And so those are important to me, and because they're important to me, there's going to be a strong relationship between what I'm rooted in and the deep seeds of Anishinaabe knowledge that I come from. That's going to be a big part of who I am and how I search. And so when you go to the leaves of the petal flower, the leaves are really where the sun and the oxygen the leaves receive that. They're like reaching up, and the leaves are receiving all that goodness from the environment. And through the leaves, this thing called photosynthesis occurs. And so the leaves really represent process, life-giving, affirming processes that when you engage in a search, it's going to mean you're going to travel. You're going to go on a journey. It might be an inner journey. It might be a journey with the folks that you want to learn from, that you're curious about what they know, that you want to gather information from. And these journeys in Indigenous worldviews, they ought to be healing. They ought to be transformational. They ought to restore relationships. They ought to restore relationships within communities and relationships within families. Those gathering journeys are really important, that they are holistic and that they are good for people and that they're good for you. And sometimes journeys, timelines there can be tension around timelines and journeys too, because if you have a project, deadlines, funding deadlines, and you're doing work within a community, then things happen in a community, a crisis or an event, it can impact your search. And so as the searcher, you have to advocate for flexibility and fluidity that is in alignment with the timelines within a community. And so journeying can be challenging, and it can also be really rewarding. And it's so full of goodness and so full of adventure. And I like to think that when we come to know and how we search and how we journey using an Indigenous worldview, it's going to be incredible. And I've had incredible journeys. I've met amazing people. Even in my teaching, I teach Indigenous research methodologies to primarily Indigenous students at the Indigenous Field of Study at Laurier in the MSW program. And I've met phenomenal searchers across the country in the last 15 years, and I've had incredible journeys with them. A conversation can be a journey. A dream is a journey. And when we bring spirit, heart, our intelligence, and physicality, our presence into the way that we search, the journey is going to be pretty incredible. And a lot of it is not going to be predictable. And so there has to be an organic, emergent element. There has to be a space for the unknown to emerge, for surprises to emerge. And the stem represents backbone. And when you're standing up for something, so for me, I stand up for Indigenous ways of coming to know. I'm standing up for my grandparents, for my Kokomish and my Shomish, what was stolen from them. I mean, their children were literally stolen from them, and their language was stolen from the children. We were dispossessed from our community, that we're actually right now in this time in the process of restoring our relationships to our community at Flying Post, which is just outside of Timmins, Ontario. And to work in this world, to work in a colonized world and stand up for our Anishinaabe language, culture, land, it takes a backbone. And we don't get that backbone on our own. That backbone comes from our family and our communities and our elders who dust us off, who pick us up, and who restore us and say, okay, get out there, Kathy, go on, and you got this. And I've had so many elders and people that have dusted me off when I felt defeated or tired or worn down, who have helped to pick me up again. And it's been a really important on my journey to also read and learn from other Indigenous knowledge seekers and Indigenous knowledge carriers. And so I spent a lifetime of learning from many other Indigenous elders and knowledge carriers, and they've generously shared with me, and I have so I acknowledge like that the the knowledge that existed before I came here. And so, and I acknowledge my family and my community the and my education and my training has been, I've had some pretty amazing kick-ass indigenous thinkers teach me, and who have helped me to decolonize my mind and unpack internalized colonial inferiority and internalized mistrust and doubt of myself in who I am and where I come from. And I've restored that and replaced that with our beauty of our culture. And now I can, to do this work that I'm doing today, it didn't happen alone. And so there's a whole circle of people around me that give me that strength and that backbone to speak up and to articulate and to, like, publishing the books. It happens with a circle of support. It happens with a circle of people around us to encourage us and to who edit to help us to become better writers. And this backbone that we have is held up by all of those people and ancestors, the land, the medicines, creation around us that we are working on. And so when, Indigenous communities around doing searches with communities around restoring Indigenous knowledge around health, around diet, around relationship to the land and physical activity, there's a community that's going to be around us that's going to say, hey, yeah, let's do it that way. And we have to find who each other are so that we're not replicating, the colonial knowledges that were never really set up to support us or strengthen us or help us to flourish. And then, of course, on a petal flower are all the diverse petals. And I represent that diversity of the petal flowers with by acknowledging that how we come to know and as we build knowledge, it has to be holistic. It has to include spirit, heart, mind, and body. And the interpretation of those areas in relationship to self, what we bring, in relationship to what supports us, our community, in relationship to the journey, and how this whole process, the holism of Indigenous ways of coming to know, are really fed and rooted in our worldviews and our principles and our ancestors, those deep seeds. That's what this image has those deep roots, and all those little dots represent those deep seeds of our ancestors' knowledge, all those ones that came before us and what they left for us. And how do we bring that forward? And how do we integrate that into a journey of knowledge building, of thinking about how will I attend to spirit? How will I attend to the heart of my work? How will I restore kinship, relationship, build community? How will I nurture and empower people's voice in this journey? And what existing knowledge do I need to know? Do I need to engage in? Do I need to understand? And there's so many examples of existing Indigenous searches that are out there today that I encourage audiences to find out who has been doing searches using Indigenous ways of coming to know in the area that you're interested in. So if you're looking at, restoring in terms of like responding to diabetes and nurturing healthy lifestyles, healthy diet, healthy relationships to the land, there's all kinds of searches that are now out there that have been published where people are talking about restoring land-based camps, land back camps that are bringing people together in good ways to learn from one another and to rebuild language and cultural knowledges. And so I think that what I've seen happen across the country with how we come to know with many Indigenous ways of rebuilding our knowledge bundles, that we do that physically, we do that experientially, and we do that in relationship with one another. And through it, we restore some of our traditional arts and crafts and our traditional way of doing things like going out in the fall moose hunt. And I see more communities are doing that. And through that, having conversations and having sharing circles where knowledge can be restored in what works within a given community. And so in and depending on your organization, the environment or the context from which you're searching, whether it's academic or environmental, organizational, there's all these issues that are it's not so simple. And it's important to just highlight the issues that to be careful of, because there are sometimes sacred knowledge bundles, for example, that are so sacred that they need to stay in the community. We don't extract them. We don't reduce them. We don't separate them. There are some stories that need to stay whole, and we have to be mindful of, I did this whole piece on colonial research trauma, that often the go-to for people when they think about, oh, I'm going to do a research project, they think about a survey, a questionnaire, or an interview. And that is colonial research trauma right there. Because those are the default colonial methodologies that people go to. And so we have to have conversations on what's the fear of trying something new? What are we insecure about? Trauma is evidenced in insecurity, fear, self-doubt, mistrust. And when we start to feel that about trying something different, trying something new, to me, I think that's trauma. And when we talk about it and we name it and we give it language and we talk about the fear of like, well, I'd really like to do some work in this community, but I'd like to do it in a more creative way that brings people together. And then you wonder, is that going to be okay? Is that like valid research? Is that a way of we can gather information? I'd say yes, go for it, try it, learn from it, and give yourself margins to make mistakes. There's other things that when you think about how we come to know in Indigenous contexts of rebuilding our knowledge bundles, that are like thinking about, how do we bring in elders and knowledge keepers into the project from the beginning, not as an addendum, and the idea of like factoring in honoraria, gifting, respecting the spirit of knowledge and the storytellers, and including, if you want to bring communities together, including childcare, providing financial support for events and activities, always food. Food is a must. We have to have food involved. Most of us probably know that already. And how do we share knowledge and results that also continues to restore and build community? Because today, for example, I'm doing this project and we've done digital stories with about 22 different people, which means they've created their own little videos, like from 3 minutes to 10 minutes. And in the video, the storytellers in there have made little videos about their experiences in relationship to this project I'm on. And it's been phenomenal to have, people who didn't think they could be filmmakers or digital story makers to see that they've made these incredible creative digital stories. So the outcome isn't so much a written report, but it's more of a visual written. And so thinking outside of the box about how do you represent and how do you share the knowledge that you're generating. I'm and these are the this was Kandaswin is the I always think about re-writing, re-writing, and re-presenting. How do we bring spirit and heart into how we write? And how do we restore our truths and tell those truths in a way that is meaningful and honorable and respectful of the contexts and the pain and anguish that those truths existed within? And there is so much healing and recovery that we are doing in relationship to health issues like diabetes. And diabetes is so symptomatic of a larger issue of the disconnection and the dismemberment of people from our land and our food sovereignty. And so, and having that connection to traditional foods and knowledge of taking care of food and preserving food. And so how do we re-present what we learn when we gather it in a way that honors the spirit, the heart, the intellect, the intelligence, and the physicality of our learning? And so I want to leave room for, I do want to leave some room for conversations, but I think I just want to say that the significance within health circles of trying to use Indigenous worldviews in how you rebuild knowledge bundles is like essential. You can't rebuild Indigenous, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. We have to begin restoring what we know, as clumsy, as awkward as that might feel in some instances. We have to try. So we have to begin reconnecting, and we have to make visible even these clumsy journeys of recovering and restoring our way of knowing. And no, it's not going to be perfect. We have to create ways of helping people sound their voice, that they have a voice. And we have to work towards an alignment now between the truth and what we know and what we do. And these things work towards healing colonial trauma. And I say when it comes to re-searching, there ought to be nothing about us without us. That we as Indigenous people need to be involved in the projects right from the get-go. And so I just want to put this out there. That's my email. I am a proud Anishinaabe Kwe. And if you want to find my book, you can find it at goodminds.com or the publisher, Fernwood Publishing. And that's my email if you ever want to connect. And I want to leave room for questions, Dan, and wanted to stay on track. So, miigwech.
Kathy, you are indeed a proud Anishinaabe Kwe. But when I think about being proud about who you are and think about being proud of your heritage, whatever your heritage may be, and the gifts that you have, can you be proud in silence? Can you be proud and listening? And could you be proud? Can you be proud without spreading that knowledge and sharing that knowledge? And not only listening, but living that knowledge. So when I think about restoring, I can't help but thinking about going out and seeking, asking, listening, inviting. And then once somebody has shared, or once you've had a thought, isn't pride going out and sharing what you've learned and sharing that story? Because all too often that story is not just their story. It's a story about us. It's a story about our humanity. It's a story about our people. And it's something that we have to share. So when I think about pride, don't you think pride is physically doing something about it?
Absolutely. I think all of the above. All of the above. And sometimes We are. I really believe in Mahatma Gandhi's "Be the change you seek." Be that. Be that. Be that one that you work towards being the change that we seek. That's how I try to live. I try to be that change. I am a at heart, my spirit. I am curious. I am a truth seeker. Doesn't mean sometimes the relationships around me are easy, because I often will be like the one trying to bring out the truth so we can have authentic conversations and authentic dialogues, and even live in awkward moments, and even live in those moments where we all of this doesn't mean that we're not proud. It means we're figuring out who we are, and in that we can I want to replace in the English language but with and. I want to say we can be awkward and we can be proud. We can be seeking and we can be strong. We can be proud and we can be quiet. And we can be grounded in our silence. Because in the silence, there is so much medicine in the silence too, in being observant. And being a bush girl, not using this is not useful. I learned to use my ears. I hear first before I see. It's like a snap. Oh, and we're walking through the bush quietly. And we listen. And then when you hear a snap or you hear something, then you look. Or you hear a sound and then you look. So I was taught to use my ears first, my eyes, and this very little. Sometimes, depending on your context, we have to use our voice. We have to be, and when I'm working in the university and trailblazing, it's not easy, because sometimes I don't want to say anything. I'd like to just have a privilege of occupying a seat, but that's not where the Creator put me there. Creator didn't put me there to be silent. I have to speak up. And sometimes within organizations, even within our own community, like sometimes within my own community, I have to speak up, because the Creator put me here for a reason and gave me one of the Onkohonwe elders I work with, Norma Jacobs. I love Norma. Says the Creator gave us a brain for a reason. We have this intellect, and it's that journey from the mind to the heart, to the heart to the mind, from our spirit, and how do we find the words to carve a pathway, sometimes through tricky terrain. And that causes me to reflect, sit back. Sometimes I take some time. I might take days or months to reflect on something before I speak. Yeah, it's a journey.
When I think about it as well, I think about, you think about that we all need to feel like we belong and we're worthy, right? It's our birthright. And some people think, well, I don't know anything, or I don't feel, but you don't need to feel anything. You are who you are. You are Indigenous. You are Anishinaabe. You're good enough. And for the ones that feel like, well, I feel I don't speak it, or I don't live in the community, that kind of thing. We need, here's just my opinion. Let me know if I'm kind of full of it or whatever, or just on my own, or if I'm in the parking lot. But we need to feel that we're good enough. We're not 50% of something. We're not 40% of something. We're 100% of something in the Creator's eyes, and we need to live it, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes getting to that for people is a journey and we as helpers, we as educators, we are the leaders. We help them through our work, through our searching. We help to give them language to describe something that is emotional, something that is tricky. And when we go on a search and we articulate these things, like that feel it's the impacts of colonial violence. It's the impacts of what colonization has set out to do, was diminish us. So as we start to heal and recover, and we want to say to people, you belong.
Mm-hmm.
You belong as you are, from where you are. You don't have to wait till you arrive somewhere. Be where your feet are. That is your only starting block that you have. And with my students, we have to do work around being there and dispelling myths about where do you think you have to arrive before you can step into being who you are and feeling okay about that. And so we have to kind of like address what's getting in the way of that, to know that if you have a blend or you're in a place of learning, be there, and that's okay. And so we help give people language to name that healing journey that people are on towards, like where I am. I mean, I'm 61 years old. It's taken me a lifetime to get here. And I'm like, wow, it's taken me so long to get here, to feel, to be, to have the clarity I have today. And man, oh man, it hasn't been an easy journey, but I just keep plugging along, Stan. Get up in the morning. I do what it is, the creator. I know what to do. I acknowledge the good day. I try my best to enact that ceremony, that life is a ceremony, in how I honor my spirit, my heart, the intelligence that I inherited from my ancestors, and taking care of my physical body the best that I can. And so all of those things uh, support this place of feeling good within myself, and that I belong. And it really is, what we're here to do is to help all our people to know, come into the circle, you belong, take your place wherever you are. Two-spirit, LGBTQT people, come on in, you belong. We have to restore our whole circle, because if anybody's not in the circle, we're incomplete. So we're working on making our circles complete again.